All right. So we're ready to get started. Welcome to this discussion. We're not exactly sure if this is a panel discussion or a discussion or a conversation or whatever it is. But the main thing is that this is a kickoff for events that will happen throughout the. I also never know where to stand in these things. So I apologize for that. I will eventually be seated. But this is a kickoff event for technology discussions at the BAC and in collaboration with a bunch of other people. And I want to introduce Cassia, who is go for it.
Can you hear me? I am the VP of AIAS at the BAC, and we have Ali, who is the president of BAC. And this is going to be our first collaborations with Peter and talking about tech. And we hope to do more. A main goal for AIAS is that we're going to have students look for knowledge outside of classes and create more opportunities like this to hear about related fields and see where else they can, like what they can implement into their schooling while they're at this time in their life. So I'm super excited. I'm really excited to hear from you guys. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
All right. So because we have a bunch of people participating as discussionists, which you guys all know who you are, I'm going to just jump right into this. Okay. We're going to keep going with the discussion. We're going to kick things off by leapfrogging from one person to another, which I will moderate. I ask that you guys kind of keep your comments to about 5 minutes or so. Then we'll get back into more of like a discussion amongst the group. There'll be a chance for audience participation, both on site and online. Also, I want to note that this is definitely a continuation of events that have happened at the BAC, specifically the BAC Talks. I know a couple people here have participated in that. The last BAC Talks event was on technology. And I'm going to actually use this to introduce us because it is a continued conversation. That was technology in design and architecture. And one specific talk was about collective authorship and virtual storytelling through analog and digital computation, which I think sounds like a topic we're interested in. If you guys want, there is a recording of this on YouTube. You can find it very easily. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand it off to Takbir to talk more about this, because me and Takbir were a part of this BAC talk. Go ahead, Takbir.
Thanks, Peter. Hi, everyone. I'm Takbir. I'm work with Peter actually at the BAC. I teach a course called Making and Modeling, and we've been collaborating for I think almost 3 years now. It all started during the lockdown when everybody was collaborating online, and it's been such an exciting sort of experience. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I'm an architect and an educator, and I started Design Aware, which is an experimental architecture and interdisciplinary design studio, which is located in Hyderabad, India, as well as Dubai in the UAE. And I also created the Fractals Workshop, which is sort of our experiment or exploration into interdisciplinary design, form finding, and fabrication, and everything else that we can't do in practice. And I'm really excited to sort of revisit our BAC talk, which was collective authorship through virtual and digital and analog storytelling. So that was something that I think really got the conversation started about how technology doesn't have to be entirely digital as we think of it, but also analog. And there are different approaches and different ways of using technology and applying it to our work.
And Tucker, this is your time to talk about the work you're doing and what you want to bring to this conversation. Again, we're going to keep these a little bit low. It's a kickoff to the conversation. I'll move you on. Go for it.
Sure. So I think for me, being a part of this discussion, apart from sharing our work and whatever we do, is also about learning what everybody's doing and what our thoughts are about different approaches and how we apply technology in our work. So the way that we work at Design Aware, and a little of this seeps into making and modeling as well, is working with our hands and exploring different ways of fabrication and different ways of approaching material. And so we've done a lot of sort of varied projects in which we look at fabrication. So the latest project that we completed is a residence, but we sort of tried to, because it was a design and build project, it sort of allowed us to take charge of the fabrication as well. So we experimented with computational design and how do we translate that into physical reality. One way being, bending sheet metal, and another way was to use augmented reality tools like Hologram, in which we sort of helped masons and workers on site who are not very computer literate to be able to use their smartphones to assist in fabrication or in assembly of a block wall. And so these are just things that we are sort of experimenting with. We're not experts. We never repeat anything that we've done earlier, so we never become experts. So it's just something that we enjoy doing, and we like to talk about fabrication and exploring everything that's new and that can be. One thing I would really like to focus on or stress on was the fact that there is a lack of technology on site in India still, due to various reasons, and so we are trying to adapt technology along with manual labor and sort of get these two things to sort of work together.
Dr. You do a lot of work with like algorithms by nature, the idea that these are not necessarily new things, but old things. I have a question, so I'm going to use as a kind of a transition to our next speaker, but how do you feel about AI?
I think everybody is really excited about it. I still prefer calling it machine learning. But I think there's so many different applications that we're seeing. And of course, you and I have been talking a lot about Midjourney and the collaboration between Midjourney and ChatGPT. I'm excited to see how, like we've talked earlier about analog to digital, 2D to 3D. That's what I'm excited to see in using these AI tools. How do we go from 2D to 3D, or how do we go from something that we haven't imagined to something that becomes a reality, which is sort of generative design and form finding as well, and vice versa. How do we go from something that we've already built and then sort of see what the AI tool would imagine it to be.
Great. And here, I know we're going to use some bulk terms. We're talking about computation. Now we just kind of went to AI. I believe we all have heard of AI, right? It's kind of an important topic right now. With that said, I'm going to move on to Aday. How do you feel about AI?
Yeah, thanks. I think as much as everybody, it's exciting to see the developments with sort of AI, artificial intelligence, or machine learning, as you may have it. But I think one of the things when we look at it, we started really see how do we deploy AI within the space of architecture design and urban planning. The thing that maybe we're a little bit disappointed about is that it seems to be very solving the same things we've always done in terms of how do we create new images, or how do we maybe understand, in some cases, running like scientific models to understand structural analysis and so on. What we're more interested in is trying to figure out, can it maybe start to sort of model or help us understand the little things that make designs feel important, kind of like talk to us at a human level in terms of how can we use this modeling things like people's responses to aesthetic elements or spatial elements within that space. And that's sort of like the area we're focusing. We think if we can sort of like figure that out, we sort of have a new tool that we can give architects and designers, not only to accelerate their workflow, but maybe allow them sort of exploring new spaces that may not typically be available to them right now.
Cool. And you run a startup, is that right?
That's correct.
I think we're going to have some questions about that later because you might have some competitors in the room. I
That
think
is
someone else is
perfect.
here. Yeah. Let's see. Jimmy, do you want to talk about how you feel about AI?
Yeah. So okay. I'm Jimmy, and then maybe I just introduce myself a little bit. I'm an architect and an architecture technologist and educator. So my work situated between academia and professional practice, and my focus on AI currently in the academia field is about how to use the AI as a tools to like stimulate our creativity in the design, but not just in the 2D image. I'm more interested in what is happening after the image has been generated. How do we use these tools to build a new modern platform that can have more can break the constraint of the current like software modern software. So I'm going build more on top of like Unreal Engine or Unity as a more like a gaming tools. But as you design or you play, you can have AI assisted to give you the simulation or do other data processing while you are modeling the massive model in the initial concept design phase. And I hope this can be another educational tools can a little bit reduce the gap between the academia and professional practice as students graduate from school.
Great. Jimmy, what is the difference between AI and computation?
I guess from my point of view, like computation will be scripted rules. So like basically you set up a rules and then like Grace Hopper, like you have specific rules to ask machine to perform a specific task, and then machine will follow the rules to just process. But AI or you say machine learning will be like learning from the data set and then to predict what can be and then find the pattern from the data set. And then this will be highly focus on how to create data set, how to clean the data set, what is useful data set for us to use, and then AI will perform the learning and then prediction, and then we can get benefit from there.
Cool. I want to go back to this idea of computation, right? And we're going to switch to that. So that was kind of a discussion about AI, right? Takbir also has this idea of computation. With computation, there's a lot of professional work that needs to go into that, and I see a lot more skills in regards to like coding, right? Scripting languages. Also within architecture, landscape architecture, interior architecture, spatial design, we're seeing that this introduction of BIM management, right? Building information modeling or information that we can then have access to. With this, I want to go to Michael Keyes. Let's bring you into this conversation. You want to introduce and what is computation to you?
Sure. So I work at SMMA and I run the architecture department. We're about 70 architects, and we exist within an integrated practice where we have designers and engineers. I'd say more conventional in the sense that we have interiors architects and landscape architects, and we have every engineer you need for a building, from civil to structural to MEP. And I know there's other kinds of integrations which are really interesting beyond the conventional, and we do strive to work with consultants and do that. Part of our unconventional integration is design technology. So we have a DT group in the office that helps all of us become a little bit smarter and encourages us to experiment on projects within project teams. And I'm just an architect with a tech fetish. So I think ultimately I'm looking for a really great design process, looking for great outcomes, and then using technology as a partner, as a tool in that. So you're asking about computation and perhaps the connection between BIM. Is that what you were looking for explicitly?
Yeah, and I want to transition over to this idea of like more of a, what are the needs of BIM? Like, what are those new skills? How are those workflows happening in firms, like production deadlines, stuff like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so BIM feels like it's been around forever because of my 25 plus years of career. It's gone from 0 to 1,000 and beyond. So what we're doing now with game engines, with with computational connections to our BIM models is amazing. So I think ultimately the best part of a BIM workflow is the collaborative environment. And our firm, we're really fortunate to have engineers and architects in the same model live, so we don't have to wait for updates. That technology lag due to working sort of conventionally with consultants is not an issue for the most part. We do work with consultants as well, but I think also the connection with contractors and being able to work with them to understand what level of detail is required to really model in order to get collaboration happening, so that we can do things efficiently, economically, and so forth. So it's having that collaborative spirit and using the tool to the best that we can, and it's not always pushing it optimally, or pushing it to its extent, but using it optimally, which is a word that requires a lot of definition through the collaborators that are involved.
Michael, you have a bunch of stuff happening at SMMA, right? Do you have any other firms that you feel are competitors? I'm going to introduce someone else here, but
we have no competitors. We are unique.
Okay.
Sure. I mean, in a sense, everybody's a competitor. We all have our own value proposition. There's a lot of great design firms, and as we can see on this call too, just a lot of great thinkers on how we use these technologies to advance design.
Great, thanks. So with that, I'm going to go to Shahin. You want to introduce yourself and tell us what firm you're at, and then what is BIM integration, stuff like that.
Sure. So my name is Shahin. I have 7 years of experience. I currently work at Gensler, the San Diego location. And I actually graduated from BAC last year through their online Master of Architecture program. And part of my everyday role here is I'm usually involved in construction document and construction admin. And every single day we collaborate between different consultants and contractor, mainly through BIM 360 and Autodesk Construction Cloud. And we use Navisworks to do clash detection with the contractors and between us and all the rest of the design team. That's pretty much how we coordinate every single day.
So Shahin, do you work with people at the firm? Do you work with clients? Like, what is your role like?
Pretty much everyone. We work with the client, we work with the contractor, we work with the consultants, and it's all about being on the same page when it comes to model management and just coordinating and being open to just being collaborative with everyone within the design team.
Cassia just said she might not know what something means. I'm sorry to throw you under the bus, but what was that? I think you're good.
Okay. I don't actually know much about model management. So in BIM, what I understand we haven't touched on it at all at school, but it's building information modeling, as far as I know. And model management. So if you're collaborating with everyone, what I imagined it is that it's a shared, file of some sort that everyone can get information from.
Right. So as part of BIM 360 or Autodesk Construction Cloud, it's one platform where we upload either we host it or the contractor sometimes hosts it. So we upload, like the architect, we upload our Revit model, and then all the consultants also upload their Revit model, and everything's linked within the cloud into each other. And we collaborate through that, where everything we do is automatically updated within the cloud, and we all collaborate through that. And because of that, we don't have to send, like back in the day, we used to send email back and forth between Revit models. But now everything's live and everything happens in real time.
Thanks.
Cassie, if I could add to the
Go ahead, Michael.
Building on that too, to try to visualize what this is. Essentially, the big player in the area is Autodesk Revit, and this is essentially a object-oriented three-dimensional model. So there's three-dimensional things that are associated with lots of data, and you can it has predefined data like for walls just to get you started, but you can always push more data points into it to describe it. What kind of wall, what kind of material is it? Gypsum, who makes that material? How much is it? You can put as much detail as you want into it and extract from it. So that's the beauty of having this information model. But as I was mentioning before, this level of detail is the big question, because sometimes a wall just has to be a wall. And sometimes you need to have all that information in order to collaborate and make the best decisions. So there's three-dimensional modeling that happens in, say, Rhino, SketchUp, tools like that are representative and allow you to connect your thinking with that three-dimensional thing. And BIM is just making that a little bit more explicit. So the model captures a lot of that data and can create its own schedules, for instance, door schedules, hardware, and everything. It's in that same three-dimensional space. And you can also use that same software to see two-dimensional views of the 3D model so that you can create more conventional working drawings.
Thanks, Michael. I appreciate you chiming in. I realize you might be outnumbered here, so we're going to stick with some Gensler folks at the moment. No, Timothy, can you join our conversation?
Yeah. Hi everyone. My name is Timothy Halverson. I'm a regional design technology leader over the Southwest. So I cover the 6 offices. It's about 850 designers, 1,000 people. And I sit in the same office as Shaheen, but I also cross-pollinate across all the offices. So my industry experience is 8 years. Out of college, I was a year with a construction company doing light gauge ornamental steel, kind of deep Rhino and Grasshopper work for fabrication, ready drawings, and then healthcare architecture before that. And then I joined as a specialist at Gensler in 2020. So that's been the last 3 years of kind of my experience. And it's been really exciting to be a part of such a large kind of one firm. I'll try to keep the Gensler jargon down, but we do truly think you're one conversation away from anyone you need to get to. So we really embrace the matrix. How do we tap into the right expertise at the right time in the project? And so I've had the honor of getting in touch with some global projects in the Middle East and in Europe and other places that are really pushing for ISO 19650 or BIM level 2 kind of standards. So you talk about, Michael, the data, understanding how much data you're certifying and embedding into your model, and then using your model as a deliverable in addition to drawings. There's a lot going on there, a lot of digital twin stuff I'm excited about that we might be able to explore and speculate on. And then on the day-to-day, I'm very much involved with, we're pushing what we've been calling resilience. It's like sustainability 2.0. How do you analyze your projects, understand how they're performing in terms of, less embodied carbon, less operational carbon, getting a preview of how that's working or not working, and then making informed decisions as a team. And then so up until this point, we've been doing a lot of education on the terms so that people at leadership levels and kind of in the model, new students right out of school or people writing fee proposals, all that kind of stuff. I'm on the team that's helping kind of integrate that language and then provide education resources to the firm to support that growth. So I'm really thinking about education and adoption on day to day. And then I get in touch with these kind of big projects if they need additional expertise.
Great. And very importantly, Timothy, go Bison. Yes?
Yeah. North Dakota State represent. I graduated in 2015 and Peter was involved very closely with the school at that time. So we share our roots from Fargo, North Dakota.
Yes. Thank you. And so as exciting as information is, exciting as project deadlines, BIM coordination is, nothing looks greater than like a rendering or an animation. So I'm going to go to Jerry Chen. You want to join us and say what you've been up to?
Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Jerry. I am a adjunct instructor at the BAC. I teach DME 2046, basically just an introduction class for 2ds Max, and sometimes 2047 if the school offers it. But I've been doing, talking to or hearing what you guys have been talking about. I'm kind of on a different boat. Basically, I do renderings for a living, and I've been doing that for about 15 years. So I am basically at the end of all the processes that I guess I've been talking about. So sometimes we are the ones that get requests from designers or architects like, hey, we have this design and we need a rendering or a couple renderings in 2 weeks. Can you do it? And so we have to figure out a way to render out the images and sometimes films for that. But what I'm going to be talking about today is specifically Unreal 5, or not Unreal 5 specifically, but just Unreal in general, because there's certainly a convergence between what the game dev industry is doing, what the entertainment industry is doing, versus what we are doing as archivists. Because if you think about it, there's this free engine renders for free. You can just drop in your model and just render it. So the reason why I'm diving into this sort of platform is because I think it's gonna revolutionize how the designers work, because you don't need to wait for the design to be 80 or 90% done before you reach out to an outsource company to say, hey, or vendor to say, hey, I need the films done, because ideally the designer want to see their design, as they're developing it. So that's kind of where I would chime in with information that you guys may have or questions you guys may have.
Jerry, can you also talk about that project you showed me? I'm not sure exactly what you can say, but the BAC did an event and we were talking about some overlap with that project. You guys did this beautiful walkthrough animation. What was that?
Well, that one is a project that is in Montreal. That's basically a project that is designed by Moshe Safdie over at Safdie Architects. And so I used to work at a studio here in Boston called Newscape. And, there's past relationship that we built with them over the course of 10, 15 years or more. Basically, when I joined Newscape 12 years ago, it was, they already had some projects that are working together on. So that Unreal project that we're trying to do is one of his projects, and that is gonna super exciting. It's one of those projects that is you can work on it and then you can at a later time look back and say, okay, just how much I've learned. Because when you're trying to pivot over from just pure visual, when I say pure visual, I just mean renderings that, hey, just a final image. The shelf life of any given renderings or film or marketing film specifically is not as long as you need it to be, because sometimes you need people to interact with it and you need to maintain that aspect of it. So the project was interesting because I'm having to go through the whole gamut of figuring out the pipeline between 2ds Max, which is my bread and butter, how we can bring data sets into Unreal, and then just present it as if it's a project that any of us can work on. I think Epic has done a really tremendous job to lower the bar for entry for anybody, making it free, and just a lot of tons of tutorials out there for people, because it's been basically established by all the people that is in game dev. And so it was interesting to see all this culmination of the two industry crossing. So there's things that we're having to learn, even after 12 years of working on V-Ray or just static renderings. Learn how we can pivot over is probably going to define how we work in the future.
Great, thank you. And again, I mentioned that because of the exhibit that the BAC had previous to our current one, that was a lot about unbuilt projects.
Yeah.
And here we also have this idea of like, I think you were doing a lot of 3D scanning, right? Where you're integrating those scans. What is the real world? What is these mixed realities and all these different things, right?
Yeah.
There's also something very different than this, which is things that are right physically in the world. And now we could debate philosophically about what is in the world or not in the world, what is real or not real. Maybe we won't go to that, but I do want to switch gears a little bit. We've talked about computation, we've talked about AI, we've talked about animation or rendering, visualization, stuff like that. Let's go to Brad. I think you have some thoughts on these things, and I know you've worked in fabrication, but you also think a lot about computation and those skills.
Yep. Hey, everyone. I'm Brad. I work at Studio NYL, which is a facade consultancy and a structural engineering firm, but also had a number of roles here in Boston. So I'm a teacher, so I want to give a shout out to my class. I see a lot of students attending today, so I want to make sure that they get recognized for their Friday night activity. Hi. Yeah.
Hi, Maya.
Yeah, it's a great class today, so it's great to see everyone here. So through my teaching, through practice, through advocacy, I try to focus on advances in technology and architectural practice. So I'm on the board of directors at the National AIA TAP Committee. Also through high performance design, on the board of directors at the Boston Building Enclosure Council. And through incorporating maker culture into the design process back in 2016, I think, I founded Make Tank. And then a few years later, supported the creation of Maker Manager. So those are both BSA knowledge communities, so that if you're into how things are made, like the craft and bringing the understanding of tectonics into the design process, those are communities that you'll definitely want to enjoy participating in. So yeah, there's computation, there's production systems, project delivery systems, and we're in an interesting time because we have all these discombobulated explosions of technologies that are manifesting themselves in a whole bunch of different ways. And like every day, Microsoft is interested in the new something GDP, right, or some flavor. And so like that's fascinating. But it won't necessarily help practitioners necessarily right away. I mean, I think there's a lot of interest and explosion of interest. But we'll see that fade a little bit. There's a famous Gartner graph that shows the interest level, and then it kind of peaks and then falls off, and then development still happens, and then there's an S curve of integration once they finally figure out what the solution to the technology's problem that it's trying to solve. In terms of Revit and stuff like that, we're still, some folks call it like BIM 1.0 in terms of the operational or just the interface, and the mechanism by which architects communicate design intent hasn't changed much. We just happen to be pushing around electronics on a screen, but it's fundamentally still the same thing, when we were doing it on vellum and even before. So it's to a large extent, right? I know that could be argued, but I say that to evoke a reaction in part. But if we're thinking about the digital age and the way to communicate, it's not what we're doing today. And Timothy, I think you mentioned exchanging models as a delivery and things like that. That got me really excited, because that's something that we tried doing successfully, with complex forms, form making. Now, you can't just do that in Revit, and the fidelity of Revit, taps out at quarter scale, quarter inch per foot, right? So any detailing efforts and such, is you have to cover up kind of what the model is, or you invest so much time to get the model correct that it's like, diminishing return into the investment of time versus the output. And so it's like, why are we beating our heads against this collective wall? Why can't we have a single source of truth that's all digital, that you can, have good interoperability? And why are we still producing PDFs, drawings of these things? Why can't there just be that common language that says, okay, we have a bunch of drywall, we have all these things, it all should be scheduled, but we don't need to print out a schedule. You just ask the model a question and it should give you an answer. And then how this gets tied into production systems. So like, for those big mega projects, you could literally have like the drywall contractor, ask the model questions and then pre-cut all the pieces to optimize the layout. That also can get into some near real-time feedback and pricing. So there's all these things that we're just stumbling around in the dark kind of right now. And we need to find that single source of truth to be able to talk to our industry partners, be able to have that exchange. It's just so frustrating the way we're practicing today.
Do you mind if I
Thanks,
just
Brad.
add a thought on that?
Go ahead, Timothy.
Well, and to talk about source of truth, it's like Gauge Ornamental Steel project I mentioned. We went to LED 500 and we went back into Rhino to be able to hand off a model to. It was all subcontractors, all shop drawings, and the shop drawings were produced in Rhino. After we understood the design intent in Revit, made sense of it, made it constructible, and then it was a model-to-model exchange so they could do their CNC machining and fuse that. So it came back into the Rhino environment because you had the precision. So, we're looking for better solutions, but even then it required a certain skill set, certain team. There's a whole different ecosystem of assembly line that had to be made just to accommodate that model-to-model exchange. But anyway,
and I bet it was very customized to that specific project.
100%.
Yeah.
But you could abstract it if you wanted to with better model management, which we can get back to at some point.
I think this is a good chance for me to jump in. And,
Go for it, Ethan. Thank you.
Introduce myself and ask some questions, certainly. My name is Ethan Kerber. I represent Robots in Architecture Research. I'm a managing editor of the Journal on Construction Robotics and doing my PhD in individualized production. My big passion in life is collaboration, and certainly looking at how we can bridge this gap between design and digital production. And so I'm interested from you who've been talking a lot about BIM and certainly the collaborative aspects of BIM to hear more about if BIM is making its way over to the construction side, both as digital twins, as process monitoring on sites, or if you see that there's a big gap between the design and engineering phase and the construction of the architecture that you're working on. I'm really interested myself in design to fabrication, this early design decision assistant tools, especially with regards to digital fabrication. So how could we embed not just design and analysis and optimization, but also direct flows to, in my case, robots to produce giant steel structures, but of course robots, and digital fabrication, which extends more than just robot arms of, CNC machines, things like this. From my side, a little bit more about myself and how I got here. I've been collaborating with Peter on some remote robotic workshops throughout the pandemic. Like so many of us, our collaborations went fully online, and we extended our robots through a cloud remote control system where now anyone in the world can control our robots and get digital twin information on, computationally driven robotic production. And we see this as an interesting educational tool, but also it's enabled IoT-based aspect for robotic adaptivity, which helps us mediate the deviation between digital and physical, which I think is also a big part of accuracy and getting these digital versions of our ideas out into the real world. So, but I go back to my question, which is for those of you working on complex and huge international collaborations, if you see the BIM models extending into construction phases, or do you see that it's a handover that then flattens these models again into documentation? It's really no longer fully immersive and digital.
I agree. This is a great question. I think we're going to definitely come back to it. I do want to bring Dylan into our conversation here. Dylan, I know you've been working with a bunch of fabrication, right? You've had front lines on this. What do you think about these topics?
Yeah, so I think the hardest thing is to actually get the major players to buy into it. That's really what I see as the major hurdle. Construction is so old school, so slow to change. And, people don't want to change unless they're really shown ahead of time. Like I saw it firsthand, implementing some of these, architectural to streamlining strategies in a large fabrication firm. And basically, we were told, or we would say, we can do this thing. And they'd say, no, it's going to take too long. Project schedules, this, that. We're going to do it the way we've always done it. And it took a lot of effort just to buy the time to develop some of these things behind the scenes while still meeting project schedules and then presenting kind of a finished product, or at least a working product, to show people, yeah, we can do this without kind of disrupting everybody else. But to explain a little bit more, I've worked in curtain wall, unitized curtain wall facade fabrication, basically very in the weeds of what you guys were talking about in terms of taking models or drawings from an architect, which are very, in terms of what I was doing, they were very symbolic wireframes. Elaborating on them a little bit with a design team, and then understanding how those models are constructed and applying a set of rules using Grasshopper to then take a 2D wireframe or take a Revit model, understand how it's constructed, and then apply a set of rules based on the design details and elaborate that into a fabrication tolerance 3D model with our own sort of like BIM attributes applied to it. That is consisting now of all the hundreds of parts that go into each panel, and then down to the Excel files that go out to the shops, and even down to like CNC programs and DXF files for plasma cutters and etc. And there are times when that can be pushed farther, but you're dealing with a large labor force with widely varying levels of skill, who, if you don't at some point end up with a hard paper drawing, you're just kind of blocking out a large part of your labor force, which then gets into a larger social question of upskilling and things like that. But
Dylan, thank you. These are really interesting topics. I believe we've gone through everyone that has elected to be a discussionist, unless anyone I can't see or have forgotten at this point. What I want to do now is stay with our discussionists here, and I'm going to come back to Takbir and encourage, as you're talking, to kind of leapfrog and ask questions of your fellow discussionists. So my question for you, Takbir, is do you want to do projects around the world? And this question about like workforce, right? Whether it's students, design, build, that kind of thing. What are you thinking about, and what have you learned from your fellow discussionists, and what questions do you have?
Yeah, I think what Dylan just said about being able to, let's say, educate the workforce, and that's one sort of challenge that I'm sure everybody's facing, and we've been facing too. That's one sort of roadblock into bringing technology on site. So everybody doesn't have a robotic arm or access to smaller versions of it or better versions of that technology. So yeah, that's one thing that I wanted to just address. Your question, I think, yes, I do want to work all around the world, which is something that I'm sure it's really exciting to work in different contexts and learn about different ways that things are done in different places. For me, in India and the UAE, it's a completely different world where the UAE is really adapting technology very quickly, and there are the ways and means of sort of bringing in new technology and bringing in new sort of methods is something that is the conversation that's going on these days. So I think, and especially because the construction industry is quite dominant, and if you see that the entire place is a desert, and so there are so many potential projects. So on the other hand, in India, where I primarily practice, it's quite saturated, especially because I'm in the city. It's quite saturated, and things are done the way they've always been done, and also due to lack of I think training, formal training, and lack of resources and budget. I think that gets really difficult, and for that, I think we've found human machine or human technology interaction to be the best way forward, rather than purely digital fabrication or digital execution. So I think even Ethan, I think in your remote robotics, we had sort of talked about it a little bit. How do we get humans to collaborate with the robots rather than purely having the robots do all the work?
Yeah, I listened recently to a talk by one of the heads of Intrinsic, which is a big Google spinoff working in robotics. And they were talking about actually how limiting digital technology can be compared to the amazing intelligence that humans possess and amazing capabilities that we have with all our fingers and arms and brains and senses. And one of the things that I like to think about, and people always ask me about when I tell them I work in robotics, is the question of displacing human labor, whereas I think it's a powerful tool for augmenting human labor. And one of the things I love about the idea of ChatGPT is certainly takes me to my favorite scene in Iron Man, where he's just talking to the robot and like, hey, pick that up, hey, do this. And I think that the human craftsmanship will never be replaced by robot or digital technology, that we should automate the boring things so that we could create more amazing art from all our geniuses. And so I'm really interested in this. I haven't folded this thread, but I think this, even in non-physical production, will be really interesting to see how our collaboration with each other and with technology blossoms and grows into more interesting things, more distributed things. And yeah, I'm very excited about where we are.
Ethan, would you be interested in partnering with someone here that has an AI focus? Do you think AI and that kind of stuff can integrate with robotics remotely too?
Certainly, I know that Carl Singline, who works over with Johannes Grauman, the partner of my professor, Sigurd Belchochin, he was quick to make a ChatGPT to Rhino to KUKA PRC demo, where he said, draw a horse, and the robot drew a horse. Very simple demo. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting thread to pull at. Actually, I've been talking to our representative at Springer for the Journal on Construction Robotics, and she was really interested in having a special issue all focused on the potential impact, or the because I think we're still at the very seed planting stage of AI in construction and digital fabrication. And so yeah, I'd be very open to these discussions and partnerships and to see where this goes.
I want to bounce back to AI, and here I'm going to bounce back to either Jimmy or Etta. Do either of you guys want to talk about this and talk about how AI? Also, you guys have a very interesting concept, which is this idea, right, of like the small things. Yes.
Are they?
Jimmy, why don't you go ahead, Jimmy, and I'll follow up on you.
Oh, okay. So me and Ali are working on a startup called Little Things AI, and then we kind of focusing on like what happened after the image is being generated, like this current AI model or ChatGPT is all like designed by computer science. Science is more like more like conceptually general ideas, but we feel architect is more like the majority of work is like what happened after the image, like in terms of how to train. transfer to construction document, how to work on construction site. And then so we are interested in building a platform that can automate the architecture workflow. And then to be exact is like so like how can we reduce the workload from the daily work? I mean, like more like boring or repeated work that can be learned or augment and then predict by the machine learning. And then also so we can focus on the design and focus on like how to like communicate with different departments, how to solve the problem like quickly, easy to get a real response from the AI. And then what the other aspect is like AI modeling platform, like so that can, because like you can learn your behavior or the process of your data or fine tune the model to fit in what your how do you design style, what is the office need, so you can better to assist how you, for example, like for young designer, or when people first join your office, they can get on board like easily by the assistance of AI. So there's so part of our work as a designer can be augmented or accelerated by this platform. And then the other things.
Yeah, thanks, Jimmy. I just realized in my excitement at the beginning that I didn't even introduce myself. I should probably do that. It may be helpful. So really, my background started up in software engineering, and then through my experience in software engineering, moved to design, and sort of in the last 2 years, I've really entered sort of like into the architectural space. And really, my entry into the space is really kind of a combination of my software engineering, software architecture experience, and looking at it, how do you implement those workflows within architectural design and also like real estate development. Coming from a person who's lived, breathed tech for such a long time, it's very interesting and amazing to kind of see there's actually a space where maybe what other fields have taken for granted, the impact of technology hasn't really sort of like permeated yet. So it's very interesting to hear about some of this idea, this topics we're discussing here about the interoperability of models, being able to exchange information, being able to create consistent workflows, making things repeatable, and also being able to sort of like support skill sets of workers at different levels. These are sort of like challenges that have been, in some cases, really resolved and addressed in healthcare or IT services and field work, and even sort of like engine management, high-tech engine management. And all those are sort of like spaces in which I've built sort of software platforms within. And that's sort of my entry. So Jimmy and I are partnering sort of in this venture. It means bringing more of the software engineering and the technical experience of building software platforms, and he has sort of like the extended experience as an architectural designer. So I think in addition to what Jimmy just mentioned here, I think I guess we always look at it whenever new technology comes up to space. There's always this special moment where our immediate reaction is to try to use technologies within the same way we've done, really automated what we've done in the past, right? And it's very exciting to see that, can we make our lives easier and a bit simpler? In parallel to that, I think there's also the opportunity is, does technology allow us to start approaching solutions, approaching problems in a different way that was not possible before? And that's the space I think was mentioned. It's a little bit in the name of the company, is in terms of a design really at a human interface point. Maybe it's those little things are the things that become, you remember, and we kind of take away from after we've built sort of like the magnificent structure. We figured out the schedules and so on, but really stop to think about the texture, the material, and how to respond to that. And sometimes those things can get lost. I think in terms of special design and organization, as an architect, I found that to be like, this how you create those special moments for your occupants and your spaces. And it's so challenging for a designer sort of like, kind of like be able to quantify that in a discussion with the client. Why are you making the decisions when everything else can be broken down to a number or quantified or shown where it comes from? So our hope in some ways is, can we help designers and architects sort of like be able to sort of like not necessarily quantify, but be able to encapsulate and demonstrate exactly how to sort of go about that workflow, and in some ways maintain that set of sensibilities that make design and architecture sort of special. So when you ask the people who are outside of the industry, so that's kind of really our focus. I think one of the interesting things for us, I think Jerry, you mentioned your work with Unreal Engine. We've also looked at sort of like this gaming platforms, whether it be Unreal Engine, and Unity specifically with ideas of not only visualization, but also the simulation aspects of it. So maybe a question for you beyond, I know you talked about rendering that still image and also sort of like rendering the movie out there. But have you in your work maybe encountered moments where simulation together with those very high quality visuals add an element, whether it be early stage or late stage in the process? Or do you have any thoughts about that?
We don't do a whole lot of simulation, but I know NVIDIA has been pushing a initiative for Omniverse, which is just another platform, but they're making it in such a way that, you have basically this sort of source of truth that anybody can contribute to. And while Unreal doesn't do actual calculations, Omniverse has tools that allows you to do that. They're talking about synthetic data generation, and I mean, NVIDIA just pushing the AI fronts quite heavily these days. While Epic and what they're doing with Unreal Engine is still more about, the interactions between the player or whoever is, experiencing going through the environment versus pure simulation. Now there are some like AI that's being implemented that you can just simply throw in that controls like the traffic of your city. Basically, Unreal can do digital twin as well. Like Neoscape isn't a forte in that front, so I cannot speak with 100% authority on that aspect. But it's something that it's interesting to see what you guys are talking about, because I'm just like an artist, right? I'm just caring about how things look, more so than the practicality of wall, like what's in it. Is it like a chip wall? Is it gonna be like a masonry wall? Like we don't do a whole lot of that, because while what I'm focusing on is more visual, like I went to school for architecture, but it was something that I decided earlier on in my career that, hey, doing all the math and the scientific things it's not my cup of tea. So I'm always an artist. And so I try to pivot earlier on into that sort of category. So I don't know if that answers your questions, but it's certainly something that we're just scratching the surface right now. And who knows what they're going to come up with. I know NVIDIA and Epic, they are collaborating on certain aspects of what can be brought into the engine and, make things look just awesome. But I'm
curious, Jerry, if I could interrupt, how much of your work do you find shifting to immersive visualizations, things like augmented reality, virtual reality? I mean, I think it's like they said, that it's such a spatial practice, and yet we build in such small screens, and it's so easy to design a skyscraper that you could 3D print on your desktop, but to understand what that really feels like walking through it, I think is so challenging. I'm curious to know if you see a huge progress or if it's still the static image prevalent.
I don't know if the industry, when I say the industry, is not my industry specifically, but definitely like the design, architecture, real estate industry hasn't quite matured enough to get there. I mean, I'm speaking from, working with just a handful of companies. Like I've worked with, KPF, Southie Architects is one of them. And I think a bunch of Gensler projects I've worked on as well. So it's definitely one of the things that it's a buzzword that a lot of us are talking about. We want mixed reality, AR, VR, what the difference is between each one of those and how to leverage every single one of those technology to its best practical use. But for right now, the problem becomes, okay, how do we calculate just the resources that we need to get those done? We're so early from my point of view that it's really hard to, while the ideal world, right? We can't just have architects just load into their, Ready Player One. I don't know if anybody has seen that movie, but you can just put on goggle, you can just look around and you're in it. You can just experience it, every single aspect of it, smell, touch, tangible things, as is in the scene. But whether or not we are there yet, I don't think we're quite there yet. But we're taking steps. Everything that we're working on, when I say we, I just mean, as mass, as a populace, I suppose, in this industry, trying to figure out, okay, what do we need? How long does it take to get things done? Because what I've been doing for the past 15 years is nothing like learning a new way of working. What Unreal takes in and what NVIDIA Omniverse takes in. You're having to think more about the trickle down effect of that. It's not just visual. It's not just perception of how things look, but you need to make it look real, feel real, smell real in the end, when we do have that technology. So it's on everybody's wish list for sure, but I don't know if the understanding of how we can get there is there just yet. So, but it is exciting.
I'm going to interrupt you quick here. And I'm also going to keep us going because we're getting through time. And we have a couple of, Cassia, do we have some comments from our discussionists and the things you want to highlight?
Yeah, Timothy, you mentioned that you disagreed with what they were talking about, the Little Things project. I don't know if you wanted to go more into that.
I was referring to onboarding with artificial intelligence, and I was excited to hear the speculation and where it can go and what we can grow with. But I do think what we've been seeing with educating, like there's a firm culture aspect to bringing people in that's critical, and people need to know that they have someone they can trust. They have a DT buddy, or they've got somebody who they can be a point of contact. And so I think being a firm that's almost 7,000 employees, we're constantly trying to de-silo, get the right experts in the room at the right time. And I think that's where it can be extremely useful, is how do I understand my own organization or people outside of my organization to bring into the conversation, because it can be daunting, right? Are you getting our clients want to know that too. Are they getting the A team today or not? And how do we time that? So I think what I was getting at was the psychological aspects, right? You need to know that you have a person you can trust and they've got your back. At the same time, I'm also like working on education resources that can be easily searchable, easy to reference, loaded up with good data so people can get those self-paced resources. And that's where I see the AI helping, is to sort of reach into the institutional knowledge internally, and that's the biggest concern. If you apply an AI engine, is it going to feed that institutional knowledge to the globe, or can you just apply it on your own firm's like data set and then use that as an internal mechanism? So we're asking those questions. I think our firm is still very much figuring out our opinion on AI, so we're still very much in research mode. But we're such a firm that's wired for people, despite how big we are. That's what I was getting at, is we can't replace that trust.
Great. Thank you, Timothy. And again, Cassia is going to bring something else from the chat. And I want to encourage anyone that's not a discussionist to post comments in the chat. And also for our audience members here, if you have a question, we're going to come to you in a bit.
Hi, Michael. So I am actually more interested in about the virtual reality workflows. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, sure. And I'm loving this conversation because it shows just how broad and diverse all these technologies are for design. And I don't think the goal is to get to one single workflow, but we'll have several things that be focusing on robotics, focusing on AI. They might be converging and connecting at times, but they can certainly be all existing at the same time. So virtual reality is something that, and Peter knows this too, because he and I have been in a cohort during the pandemic to really focus on what's good and possible about that, using that tool, that environment. And I'll just mention maybe two things. One is that my firm we're using VR beyond just using it for walking clients through and understanding our design spatially, which we were doing prior to the pandemic with goggles that were connected to a supercomputer. Now that we have wireless goggles that are connected, through Wi-Fi to some great machines and doing all the computation elsewhere, and the goggles are getting smaller. The fact that we can use it for more than that. So we're using it for education. We have something that we call the Sim Lab, which is a simulation lab where we can understand how things come together. And we have 3-dimensional, or call it 4-dimensional things that we're creating, so you can see how they come together and split apart. So you can actually build something with the tools that we have, which are pretty incredible in VR even right now, and only going to get better. In order to stimulate learning, almost like how do you just learn with your hands and not just what you read or what you even see through YouTube, but actually, hands-on, so to speak. It's not quite reality, but it's pretty close. And the fact that you can be in a space with more than one person is incredible. So you really have that presence, and you have that immersivity of being in a space, being at one-to-one. And sure, you can even make yourself super small like Ant-Man and super large just with a quick movement of your controllers. But even just being in a space with a person talking about something that you can manipulate is kind of a game changer. And that's more on the educational side. But on the design side, even I've been inspired with Tech Bear has been talking about, I say internationally and cross-cultural in a sense, because we have a pro bono project. We're working on a school design in Nepal, and it's about a 12-hour difference. And talking with a young architect, talking with an experienced engineer. She's from India, he's from Nepal, and using the tool. So I gave a friend of mine in Nepal when he was here about a year ago my goggles, and in the hopes that we can make something work. And then I got another set, and I was hoping it wouldn't be too difficult, and it was actually very easy when he connected. And within just a few minutes, we were interacting in the same space, being 12-hour time difference, instantaneously, walking through a design model and talking about things and saying and doing 3-dimensional markups in the space. And I say cross-cultural in a way because it's not, the technology is not the cultural norm, in the design process in Nepal. So in order to help each other learn something new, and being able to be patient, being able to understand, what materials we have and all that, it's just been an incredible adventure that continues. So it's a great technology to do many things. Super interesting and exciting because it's new and shiny, but it's actually really, really useful.
All right, I see some people want to talk here. So
Peter, can I just build on that for one quick second?
Yep.
I want to extend that also to digital fabrication, because our last workshop that we had with Dagmar Reinhardt in Australia, we used HoloLens, where people were controlling these augmented reality robots and then pushing these code directly to robots in Germany. And I thought that this was going back to Takbar's ideas of how do we teach workers on construction sites how to use new digital technologies. It was so immersive and so clear for people just to grab a transit point and move it around and watch a robot then follow that transit point. It was like so easy to upskill people that had never used robots or computational design into new approaches to interactivity. So I like to see it on the design side, as Michael was saying, and also on the fabrication side. I think it'll be, once the technology is more accessible, certainly disruptive.
I agree. And Takbir's name has been mentioned once or twice here, so I'm going to give you a chance to respond. I also want to go here to, we built this like open virtual reality environment to display work. And I also, this is like, we haven't talked so much about open sourced things, just things that are free and open to everyone, right? Takbir, what there? And then also we're going to come back to one online question and then people in the audience. Takbir, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's really relevant. Open source. A lot of these programs that were discussed are, they're free to use. And then I think the social aspect of VR was also discussed. So I think it's really important for things to be one is, of course, open source allows not just us to, or as users, to be able to use these tools or these platforms for free, but it also gives the feedback to the developers to keep improving them, right? And social VR, I think that really reminds us of the we worked a year ago, I think, in Mozilla Hubs, where we gathered all of the student work in the Fractals workshop that we did at the BAC, and it was kind of an interconnected series of virtual reality spaces, which we had people from all over the world sort of occupying the same space and being able to speak to each other, and it's kind of like a gallery, but I think it's more of a gathering space where you have people from different parts of the world at the same time, and they're discussing about this this design that's done by the students. And in fact, I was sort of encouraging some of the students to indulge in digital vandalism. It didn't really happen because they're too scared to do it, but because you're able to interact with tools and with other objects which are there in the virtual space, but by writing on them or by like graffitiing them. So that's something that I think I found really interesting that could be done. It's like it makes more collaborative.
I want to specifically at this time ask if anyone in our audience would like to ask a question. Here, 1 second. There you go.
Hi, I just had a question. So maybe it's the reverse in listening to all this, because it's very interesting, all the different aspects from which everyone's coming from in pushing technology. And there's been mention of sort of education, or but I was sort of interested in, how that would be applied. For example, on a worker, like I'm a student here, but I'm also do engineering, but I've been building houses on Nantucket. So a lot of different people, a lot of different languages, but certainly there's been job sites where you're using, say, AutoCAD, but not always. But the idea that a lot of this, even virtual communication, I'm just sort of wondering, like on your end, on the construction end, because eventually these things have to get built. Just like if we're all looking at a screen, how it prints out isn't what it always looks like, on a screen. So, in other words, the transformation of materials of what you're talking about from a technology point of view, how you sort of see that maybe going the reverse, like how would you help someone who certainly can frame something and they know how to use an impactor and they're putting timber locks in and all of that, how are you going to, there's got to be a connection to the actual building, or maybe you don't see it and you just sort of isolate and focus on that particular thing and hope that it comes together with maybe somebody else. And like I said, I hope that it's kind of articulated as well as it can be. But
thanks. Brad, do you want to speak to that? I'm actually going to suggest. I know other people want to, but
yeah, it's excuse me. I think there's there's a scaling issue with appropriate tool for the appropriate application. So certainly the small single family and small multifamily construction that I've been involved in, even when it was fully panelized systems, so complete offsite construction, wall panels are delivered, picked with a crane, screwed in and stuff. There's still some of the high thought leadership ideas that we're talking about here just will not at this point in time translate directly into a large portion of the built environment today. The change is happening, but slowly. Luckily, everyone that I worked with had that entrepreneurial perspective where they say, okay, this is like what I was doing, but it's slightly different. And if it's going to save me money and time, as someone who sells hours for a living, right? So like as design professionals and the construction crews, that is a very attractive value proposition. And so I must emphasize, hands-on training and getting used to something, because there is that fear, uncertainty, and doubt that's going to be the barrier of entry for anyone trying anything new, especially in a low, very low margin business such as construction. You make your money on change orders, right? I mean, everyone knows, like supers and suppliers, they get their bonus on how the percentage of change orders that they can get across your desk, right? I mean, that's how it works. Okay, it's not the first price; it's the change order is where you make your money. So the the idea of fabrication, offsite fabrication, we're talking about robotics and just like how to pump out systems. We worked directly with Bensonwood, and they have a great program up there. I don't know how robotic it is. I think it's still a very manual process. But CATIA was a great example of something that they're trying to do something. I don't exactly understand fully why they failed, but at least it was, trying to push the industry in a direction that I thought was very interesting.
If I could jump in with my
Go ahead,
thoughts,
Ethan.
certainly. I think that, as you say, that change orders, my boss always used to say, bid low and make money on change orders, definitely as a contractor. I think that one of my inspirations is a woman named Noni Pittinger, who was instrumental in bringing more eyes to robotics and looking at scanning for deviation analysis. Because I think what happens is layers and layers of some subcontractors build up, to the edge of tolerances just within their contractual obligations. But then, 3 contractors down the road, those tolerances exceeded, and you're not sure where in that subsystem that's the deviation causing huge problems. So I think I see this in robotics, that some of the most innovative startups are focused on bringing point cloud scanning with robotics on site to do deviation analysis and give eyes to BIM models to say what's within tolerance and what's outside tolerance. And certainly, as I and our chair, Professor Sigurd seem to work to bring robotics onto construction site, this is one of the first steps: is a robot has to know where it is and know where the world around it is in regards to BIM models. Okay, that's very, as Brad says, advanced technology that's years away, but I do see that point clouds are becoming more and more accessible. And I think this, even for, the basics of building, is a really powerful thing to see where the deviation between digital and physical is. And the more we can give people feedback at early stages, whether it's a hologram or with augmented reality or 3D projectors, I think this is a powerful flow of information. I would also go a step for kind of to the more basics of architecture, and how, as a sculptor, my interest in architecture has changed to see that no matter what technology we use, the buildings I like more and more are pre-rationalized and mathematically driven, so that actually the single source of truth is some design build-up intent. And I have to give a huge credit to Abdulmajid Kadanu, who just published a PhD on this. And I've seen this used at like Foster Partners and Arup and places where they build geometric build-up models aside from any software, so that you're following mathematical principles in build-up. So whether you're building in Tekla or Revit or ANSYS, you can follow math, which, I'm not a mathematician, but the more I see complexity becoming so challenging, the more I like, rule-driven geometry in architecture.
I think I saw Ada's hand, and also we just have a couple minutes left in our official time. Ada, go ahead. We will stay on the call after a couple of minutes just for casual stuff, but go ahead, Ada.
Yeah. First of all, I want to commend whoever asked that question. I apologize, I couldn't clearly see you from here. I think it's a fantastic question. Specifically, just as an insight, again, my background, I'm originally from Malawi, which is a very small country in Southeast Africa. So, as I go on my journey, sort of like being exposed in this sort of highly industrialized world, it's always with a little bit of sort of angst inside, trying to understand how can I sort of like apply the same technologies to places where I come from, right? Because otherwise, what we end up getting is a continual sort of like gap between sort of the haves and the have-nots. So whereas we can, it's humbling to think about virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and all these sort of new technologies that we're talking about. There's also a danger in terms of they just continue to reinforce certain ideas, certain ways of working that leave other sort of regions behind. But at the same time, but there's also, if we are mindful about it, is interesting, because one of the things I did as part of a research project, I started thinking about, can we train, especially with the cell phone and photogramming being so accessible right now to everyone. I was able to work with some researchers, with the research out of Malawi, to ask them to go scan a traditional Malawian piece of architecture. And that way we could take something that's maybe very unrational, something that maybe be left on the side because in the space of a mathematical logical system, they're able to scan that and we could turn that into a 3D model. In the process, it's sort of like then start thinking of ways to bring them along in the process. Because I think there is a danger with AI, just the speed and the efficiency it works. It makes it such a totalizing piece of technology that we also have to be a bit mindful in terms of how can we make sure like other cultures that maybe not work primarily within English are included within this sort of technology. Because otherwise, we're just repeating the ills of the past. And that is sort of like a dangerous place. So it's kind of fascinating. I think it's very great that at this young age, you're sort of like seeing this potential downfalls and you're starting to think about them. And I sort of like encourage you to continue asking those questions, because I think we need more people sort of like asking those questions. Like, what about these other places in the world? How do we sort of drive with the idea of equity and inclusion across the world? How do we make sure we maintain that? So I just want to commend that question coming out.
Thank you. I want to say something real quick, and then we're going to like officially end this thing, but people who want can hang out and continue the conversation. I want to mention that one thing we haven't exactly focused on here is like, what is a philosophy behind these developing technologies? Like, what is the theory behind this? I think this is really important for us to understand. There's a lot of ethical considerations. And one thing I want to comment on, for example, Graham Harman, who is still at SCI-Arc, I believe, and is object-oriented ontology, this idea that not everything is just human-centric, right? That the world is not just a place for humans, but there are relationships, conversations, and even dialogues between ourselves and technologies, ourselves and machines, machines and other machines, or the objects that we're bringing in. So let's be mindful of that. And also, I don't think we should think about technology as necessarily a hegemony. This is something that Patrick Schumacher has suggested early on, was that parametricism, when he coined that, is a hegemony or a ruling power that takes over by force. Is that really how we want to feel about this? Is that the relationship we want to have? And with all that said, does anyone want desperately to say something out loud to the group before we officially end?
I desperately want to say something.
Go ahead.
But I as I was listening, I was thinking about virtual design construction and all the work that they do to actually utilize AR, VR to communicate and actually mobilize like a team and multiple teams of people to construct a building. Well, I also was thinking about a TED Talk that was on, I think it was MAD Architects, but they went in and built, like it was in Africa, and they had the community actually build a mother birthing center. And so the people that were going to use the building built the building. And so I like this idea that, could we have a common language around visualization and the materials that we put together? And you don't even have to know English, but you've got like a Lego set. And it's not just like pages, which is just a simplified architectural set. It's actually like an immersive virtual walkthrough model that just tells people how to put things together, right? And it's visually and tactile, and it's a playbook, right? Where you just simply orchestrate how to put it together. Now you could have someone with the design intent organizing how to sequence that, which doesn't have to be the person actually doing the work. And so I feel like there could be this way to like democratize and really be more inclusive with the construction process and give people opportunities to upskill locally, which is the goal, right? Rather than having to like go to the ends of the earth to find that one product, you can get everybody involved and give them an opportunity to grow. So I think the WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get, but like how we break that down and communicate that through these animations. I think of a few products that we're not really leveraging as enough at Gensler, but like Fuser comes to mind. Some configurators with Unreal Engine come to mind. There's a lot of even Revitsto, all that kind of like virtual model space that's outside of Revit. There's opportunities there. So I want to bring that up just as like a playbook, because we're not just communicating drawings anymore. We're communicating a building, and that's the mechanism by which we express our intent. So
thanks.
That was kind of, yeah. Thanks.
Great. Anyone else want to desperately add something to this?
I think that I like the what I think Brad said, that we make our living selling hours, and that this pushes us to be very pragmatic. But also, I think we're all here with a passion for innovation, and we're all somewhat futurists and technologists, and with a love of what if what might come. I mean, and I'm curious to see what architecture looks like in 100 years, when digitalization, when our spaces are totally blended between the digital and the physical, and how that'll change our lives, or for the better or the worse, or how this will connect us more digitally. I think it's nice to see groups like this come together and talk about technology and the challenges and opportunities. And so I certainly thank you all, and Peter, and I'm excited to see where this all goes.
Thanks, Ethan. Takbir, did I see your hand go up?
I mean, I really wanted to echo what Ade said about, and also Timothy, about democratizing these technologies. I think they need to be to become ubiquitous, just like all the smartphones that we have in our hands, and not just us, but even the workers on site, and everybody on site has a smartphone, knows how to use it, and so it's easier to sort of teach them, or easier for them to sort of learn on their own also, how to use technology and apply it on site. And I think rather than designing the design or one sort of singular solution, we should be looking at designing systems which will allow others to just use those systems and apply them, so that the designer is not concentrated to one person, but more of a network of people who are working together.
Thanks, Takbir. Brad, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. To all the students out there, I highly recommend that you play my favorite video game, which is Excel or Google Sheets. Learn how to use the most popular programming language in the world. It will teach you a modality of thinking and processing, and just like analytic thought, that can then be the gateway drug to a lot of other applications. So it's a very practical sort of thing that you can pick up with YouTube videos and other stuff. And it will immensely help you early on in your career.
I couldn't agree more. I've done a lot of really interesting stuff on Google Sheets. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, if I could add to that in a way of encouraging students to not think about just one tool as being the only answer, but thinking about the fastest tool, the tool that makes you think the quickest. And even if that's a hand sketch, or if that's using Rhino, if you're really good at it. But it reminds me, Brad, you mentioned that we had a design exercise in the office where we're patenting a facade, and the designer didn't know Rhino, but used Excel to this really high level that was very visual. And then somebody saw what he did as a proof of concept and said, oh, I can make a Dynamo script for that. And before you know it, we had something that was very deep computational. But if that person was afraid to use Excel or to use something, that would have just been an idea that remained in his head. So use the tools and use them in a messy way if you have to, but use a tool and think, I guess, more than use the tool.
Thanks, Michael. And I know there's plenty for us to talk about. We are going to officially end right now, and I want to reiterate that this is the start of something. We were just talking. We are going to reach out to each other. You can reach out to me and also Cassia, right? It's a collaboration between AIAS and digital media. Again, Thank you everyone for being here. We'll hang out for a bit, but good to see you all. Let's keep the conversation going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for pulling this together, Peter.
Thanks, everyone. I need to jump, but thank you so much for the conversation. Looking forward to sort of continuing the talk with everyone.